I'm Rich Kelsky, host of Backyard Forestry. And tonight's presentation is What's That on My Tree, featuring John Hooven. A little word about the NJFA. We're a 501c3 organization which advocates for all of the forests of New Jersey by supporting responsible, sustainable use in science-based forest management. This presentation is for general informational purposes only and not intended to constitute specific legal, tax, professional, or other advice. No claims, promises, or guarantees are made about its accuracy, completeness, adequacy, or suitability. We encourage landowners to seek professional advice from their attorneys, accountants, foresters, and other professionals concerning their woodlands and otherwise. We just had our annual meeting in March. It was quite successful, very well attended. In fact, it was oversubscribed. We had a wait list, and unfortunately, we couldn't let everybody in who was on the wait list due to room restrictions. So next year, when you see the notice come out and you want to attend, please register early. If you're enjoying our backyard forestry webinars, I ask that you support them, support the NJFA by becoming a member or making a donation. You can do that at njforestry.org. The organization would appreciate it, our board would appreciate it, our officers would appreciate it, and I would appreciate it. So please, if you have the opportunity to do so, please join or make a donation. Thank you. Just a word about John. I'm going to pick up my notes about him. John is a CCF. John, what's a CCF?
Candidate certified forester.
Thank you. Yeah. I knew that, but I figured everybody would want to know. You are the chair of New Jersey SAF. That's the Society of American Foresters, which is an organization of professional foresters nationwide. And he is the district forester for DelAtlantic Conservation District. More than that, John is committed to forestry and forestry education awareness. He is a unique individual in that respect, in that I have not met anyone in this industry who really has as much interest in the future of forestry in New Jersey as John does. And this wasn't in his resume, this is from me. He previously served as an officer and director of the NJFA, and he was the facilitator of the New Jersey Woodland Stewards Program. He is a New Jersey approved forester, which takes a certain amount of experience and years. He is a Maryland licensed forester and a USDA technical service provider, which is important if you want to do anything in conjunction with the USDA. He is a previous winner of the NJFA Sal Vuccolo Award. He's a graduate of the State University of New York, College of Environmental Science and Forestry. So, what's that on my tree? That is one of the most asked questions posed to foresters and tree care professionals. Everyone gets concerned. They're walking through the woods. They suddenly see a splotch, a hole, a growth, and they don't know what it is. They start to worry. They get concerned. They call in professionals, or they don't fail to call in professionals. And as John points out, many of these things can be benign, but some can be trouble on the horizon. So tonight we're going to take a look at a whole range of those. John has a whole lot of slides and a lot of images to look at, so you'll probably see things that you recognize on your own trees, and you'll learn a little bit about them. And while some of these will allow you to make decisions on your own as to whether to contact a professional, we always suggest that you contact a professional if you do have concerns about your trees. And now I'm pleased to present, and we are pleased to present, What's That on My Tree with John Hooven. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. For those of you that know, these presentations are on YouTube and under New Jersey Forestry Association. And I do have other presentations that I've done for the Forestry Association. So hopefully, if you like this one, then there's other ones out there that you may enjoy as well. Yeah, as Rich already explained my background, I put this presentation together for the New Jersey Forestry Association. I am a district forester for DelAtlantic Conservation District. There are conservation districts throughout the entire state of New Jersey. Each one is mandated by Department of Agriculture. That being said, they are all independently operated of each other. So what's that on my tree? We're not going to discuss who's on your tree. So if you have any of these type of situations, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to sort that out for yourselves. And we also aren't going to be discussing what kind of snake is that on my tree. So impairment hierarchy, what I've basically done with this presentation is we're going to go over the most benign things that we find on the trees first. And then as we go along in the presentation, we'll be focusing more on the more detrimental things that we find on our trees. So the first thing we're going to be going over are the epiphytes. Epiphytes are basically, if you break down the Latin of it, it just basically means that they are benign and that they just find themselves with a good location to actually grow and do their thing. In this particular case, we're talking about the epiphytes of the bryophytes, which include mosses and liverworts, and also lichens. Among other things, the only thing that they do is they connect themselves to the tree as a substrate. They just attach themselves and they just find themselves with a really nice place that they like to hang out and grow and do their thing. They are not parasitic and they in no way damage the trees. That's an important thing that you need to know with regard to that. And basically, this presentation was based upon a presentation I do on mosses that I did down at the Pineland Shore Course and also previously for the Forestry Association. I'm a big moss guy. I actually had Dr. Robin Wall Kimmer as my professor for mosses when I was at SUNY ESF. So we had a whole semester of moss ecology with Dr. Kimmer, and she's inspirational. And that's one of the reasons why I did a presentation on mosses based upon that presentation. But I didn't want to go over just mosses again. So, I basically wanted to discuss other things as well. But take a look at this. This was out in New York State, out in the middle of a forest. It was just a little pocket of moss hanging on the end of this tree. It's just absolutely incredible. Mosses and bryophytes in general are an absolute incredible organism. So these are some of the niches that you would actually find mosses growing and good places for them. Of course, the things that are important to the mosses and other bryophytes are moisture, light availability, the pH of the substrate, the salinity. So you're not going to see a lot of mosses down the shore, for example, because of the salt air. The substrate's state of decay, which we'll go over in a little bit. And of course, location, location, location. That's what it's all about. So I particularly like this series of photographs from my presentation on mosses. And if I go up over here, you can see this moss right here growing and this whole pocket of lichen that was growing on this tree. And this was down at Franklin Parker Preserve. And here we have a close-up. And then I went so far as to get an even better close-up of it. And these are actually what are known as the capsules at the end of the sporophytes that actually will produce the spores that for sexual reproduction. Mosses generally will reproduce asexually. So they actually conserve energy that way by reproducing that way, as do lichens as well. And we'll go over that in just a minute. Again, this is down at Franklin Parker Preserve. There are a lot of things to see down in that neck of the woods. So just quickly, some moss myths. Mosses do not grow exclusively on the north side of trees, and they do not compete with your lawn. If you got moss on your lawn, it's because the moss likes it there and your grass is struggling because grass outcompetes moss. Any vascular plant will outcompete moss. Mosses do not harm trees. They simply have a good substrate and a good place for them to grow. They can live in direct sunlight, but they prefer shade, and they're very drought tolerant. But they also can take up some nitrogen from the substrate that they're on. Now, we said bryophytes before, so mosses are just one part of the triad of bryophytes. The other ones being liverworts, and the third one, which we will not discuss in this presentation because there's not a lot of them in New Jersey, are the hornworts. But this liverwort right here is found on red maple. And it actually intrigued me the first time that I noticed it and saw it because it looks like somebody took a big pocket of mud and just threw it up against the tree. And it just splattered out. And that's what you're seeing right here. But if you look up closer, you can actually see some structure and branching. And then when I took my little portable microscope to it, you can actually see the structure of the liverwort itself. It has a very distinct and different structure than mosses. We won't get into that, but needless to say, they kind of look liverish to look at them under this light. This particular one happened to be growing. If you see where my cursor is right here, this is a lichen that you're actually seeing up close right here. So it's interesting because we'll go over that also again in a minute. They kind of share a niche there. Lichens are a much different species. So lichens are actually not a single species, but a joint venture of species. They're a symbiotic relationship between fungi and a symbiont, which is either algae or cyanobacteria. The fungi provide a habitat for the symbiont, and then the symbiont provides food for itself and the fungal host. So the fungus and some of these fungi that form lichens can actually be found in other areas on their own, but most typically they will be found only with their symbiont. So they have a long-standing relationship that they've developed over time. And this is very important because these species and the bryophytes go back to the earliest organisms that actually occupied our planet. So they have a long history of survival, and that's one of the reasons why they still persist to this day in many different forms. So the lichens are named after their fungal mycobiont. So what that basically means is, once again, taking the name of the moss is we're actually looking at the fungus and not the algae or cyanobacteria that they're working with. The body parts are known as thallus, and they're usually categorized by the thallus. And they come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. The one over here is actually a bearded lichen, which in some references, they refer to them as Spanish moss. But again, it's a lichen and not a moss. So these are the different types that you'll see in the way of structure. Fruticose is a tuft-like pattern. Foliose is leaf-like. This is considered foliose right over here. Crustose is crust-like, kind of looks like paint, like it's really stuck to the surface and can't be broken away from it. Squamulose, which is crustose below. Leprose, which is powdery. Gelatinous, which is jelly-like, not to be confused with jelly fungus, which is a completely different type of species. Filet mignon, gelatinous. I'm so sorry about that, folks. And bisoid, being wispy. So here we have the structure of lichens, so you get an idea. Once again, the fungus itself is providing the structure. Everything in blue represents what's known as the mycobiont or the fungus. Everything in green is the photobiont. So the light comes in, the water comes in, and it photosynthesizes just like a plant. It's taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and it's respirating, and it provides energy to itself and also to the mycobiont. Fascinating species. So when I was doing my project, my semester project for moss ecology class up in school, I noticed that everywhere where I was collecting mosses, I also seemed to be coming across lichens, especially on trees. And this picture is kind of a bad one to show because it gives the impression that the rot is a result of the fungus and the lichen, but that's not the case. It just happens to be a good picture to show the two of them together on a tree that died. That's all that is. So I was collecting mosses for this project, and I found lichens growing on a tree along with the mosses. Using the same niche. So I was asking myself, is there a correlation or is it just coincidence? So as a student of ecology, of course, I'm interested in this type of thing, and the relationships and how they affect each other. Niche theory, of course, indicates that two species cannot occupy the same niche simultaneously. So does that mean that there's a back and forth tug of war with these species, or are they actually tolerant of each other and maybe possibly helping each other out in a way? So both mosses and lichens are epiphytic, as we talked before, and are autotrophs. And the lichens, of course, are autotrophs by their symbiotic relationship with the algae or cyanobacteria. Both organisms require, to varying extents, water and favorable air composition. I'm going to stop here for a second just to note that lichens on trees are a fantastic indicator of clean air. They are not tolerant of pollution. So if you're seeing a lot of lichens growing on your trees, the reason for that is because you have clean air. Case in point, when I was down at University of Maryland Extension working as the forest stewardship educator, I was doing a walkthrough with some interns, and we noticed that there were lichens growing along trees in a field. And when we went across to right next to where the crops were, there were no lichens growing on the trees. I don't exactly know why, but I have a feeling it probably has something to do with what's being sprayed on the fields in the way of either fertilizer or maybe herbicides, something to that effect. It was very striking, though, to notice that right next to the crop fields, there were very little in the way of lichens. They can't compete with vascular plants in less stressed and less disturbed environments, but they do share environments with each other. Yeah, but what about this? So here we have a log that's rotting, and it's quite obvious. And this is a fungus known as Krishmeria ducha, which is brittle cinder fungus. If you ever see it up close and personal, it actually looked like the log caught on fire, but it's actually a result of that particular fungus. And yet, the moss is growing up here on top of the log. One of the reasons why, as regular fungus will respirate. So it's actually using oxygen and exhausting carbon dioxide, just like you and me. So the moss is taking advantage of that effect, and it is taking advantage of the fact that the additional carbon dioxide happens to be in the area. So it lives in that substrate just because it has easy access to the carbon dioxide that it needs to live on. So we got some questions that came in through the presentation, and I wanted to include them in this presentation as we're going along. Now, if you don't see your question in here, it's either because it was as a part of another question, or it gets answered somewhere else in the presentation. But the first one was, why do some lichen species prefer certain tree species as compared to others as their host? And I've actually not noticed that. I did a quick Google search on Google Scholar to see what the issue is with regard to that. And I didn't see anything in the way of any papers that automatically came up. So I don't have an answer for that, simply because I have not noticed that myself and have not found any research on that effect. Is it true that shelf lichen is safe to eat, and do you need to cook it? I'm not aware of what shelf lichen is. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume what you mean is shelf fungus. And we'll get to that when we're talking about fungus. But in general, because I did take a semester of forest pathology and a semester of mycology, I know enough to know that I will not ever identify anything on the internet or anything via photos or the like. I'm going to look at something myself, because some species of fungi, you actually need to look at spores underneath the microscope to be able to determine whether or not they're safe or not. So that's something I won't venture into in any of these type of discussions. Does an overabundance of lichens mean the tree is sick? No. That being said, though, I have a Norway maple outside my window, which is slowly dying as a result of, I think it's probably hypaxilon, which is a fungus which basically kills trees. Just happens to have a lot of moss and lichens on it, but it has nothing to do with the tree being sick. However, going back to that theory we said before about the excess production of carbon dioxide, that could have something to do with it. But again, all the research indicates that both lichens and mosses and other bryophytes are benign to trees. They do not affect the trees at all.
So, John, just
Yeah.
to come back to that, because I know what's on their mind is, on the audience's mind is, I go in the woods and there's lichens starting to climb my tree, or they're high up on my tree. They're not along the ground level where there's other mosses and things happening. And I'm seeing it in more and more places on my tree. Do you think that is an indication of any change in state of the tree?
I don't think so. And the research that I've read indicates the same.
Okay, thank you. By the way, if anybody wants to put any questions in the Q&A, we will try to get to them at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
If a tree's trunk is covered in moss and lichens, is that harmful to the tree? And is it an indication that it's too damp? I will answer the second part of that question. The first part I already answered. It is likely that it's getting sufficient water for the species, and that's important because these species, especially mosses cannot reproduce without water. So that's inherently something that they need to be able to go and sexually reproduce. But it's not necessarily an indicator it's too damp. It's just coincidental that are located there. And once again, they just find a favorable niche, and that's why they're there. So the next thing we're going to do is jump over into insects. Now, as you look at this picture on the left-hand side here and see this, you may be alarmed when you see something like this on your tree, and that's exactly why I posted this picture here. Just because you see insects on trees doesn't necessarily mean that there's any correlation to anything that the tree's going through. And the reason I bring that up is because specifically, one of the most asked questions I get is, my tree's in decline and I see ants climbing all over it. Or my tree's in decline and I've noticed that there's a lot of bugs on it. There's not necessarily a correlation there just because you're seeing insects. More along the lines, you're noticing the insects now because all of a sudden your tree is in decline for whatever reason. And that's an important thing to note. A lot of these species actually coexist and have co-evolved with each other. And they have ways of defending themselves against attack by other organisms. The only time that becomes an issue is when you have a new organism that moves into an area, and especially in the case of non-native invasive species. We'll go over that briefly in a little bit. But insects find accommodation habitats on trees. Of course, they find other insects, which some of them will eat. They may be able to eat the leaves on the trees. They may be able to eat the fungi that's growing on the trees. They may pollinate the trees. There's lots of different reasons why they want to hang out with the trees. And that's the key point, because they are opportunists. They just take advantage of the fact that the situation is there. They can vary by species from beneficial to benign, from nuisance to deadly. The damage can vary by life cycle, and some parasitize other insects, and that benefits the plants. So this particular image that I started with is it's a bug in the Hemiptera order, or the true bugs, in the family Coridae, and it's Acanthocephala species. That's the genre. It feeds on plants, but they're relatively benign because, once again, they have organisms that basically are eating them, such as birds and other insects. And so there's a balance there. So they don't necessarily get to the point where they're actually affecting other plants. Now, they're known as leaf-footed bugs because if you look on the leaf, the leg right there, it actually resembles a leaf. Which is kind of like a camouflage feature of them. And they're also related, believe it or not, to the stink bugs. And they will produce an odor if they're threatened, which I thought was pretty interesting. And there's this little beautiful number right here. These are cicadas. That's the face only a mother could love. And this one is actually just emerged out of its from the underground in its final life stage. So it hasn't gotten to the point where its wings have hardened up and its shell has hardened up yet. It's actually in a very delicate state right here. And this is actually one of the what are known as dog day cicadas. Because they are usually around at the height of the summer, during the dog days of summer. That's when the star Sirius is highest in the southern sky in the morning, in the sky. So the periodic annual insects that they spend most of their life underground. Now, the annual cicadas actually will emerge every 2 to 5 years or so. Periodic cicadas, on the other hand, will emerge in mass in great swarms every 13 to 17 years. They spend most of their time feeding on roots of trees, and they're great food for birds. They're relatively benign. When they are in their adult stage, they do not eat a lot. When they do, they will just suck a little bit of sap from the tree. I don't know how many remember the Brood X periodic cicadas that were observed back in the early to 2020s. I picked up a picture here going back to school up in Syracuse at the rest area on I-78. I think that's over by Harmony Township, right before you get to the Pennsylvania state line. And as I was coming up 31 going through Flemington, passing through the wooded areas, the noise was just deafening. It was just unbelievable how loud they are. And more so than just your regular dog day cicadas. What they do here is, if you notice this twig, it's damaged right here. They will actually use their proboscis to actually probe through, and they open up that branch, and that's where they lay their eggs. And the emerging nymphs, they start their life there. The eggs hatch. The nymphs drop to the ground. They burrow underground, and that's where they'll live for the next 17 years until they emerge once again. Now, this picture over here just happens to show an earwig that happens to be on one of these twigs. It may or may not be there waiting for one of the nymphs to come out so that it can eat it. That much I really don't know. I should have done a little more research as to why an earwig would be in proximity to all these. Just noticed it was there when I took the pictures. So, and of course, then we have defoliators, and we're looking at basically these are mostly Lepidoptera, and those are the moth and the butterflies. And the larvae can live and grow off of trees, and they eat the leaves, and or they can also be living under the cambium of the trees. This is Hepagardus species up here. This species actually was photographed on a maple leaf, but has nothing. It doesn't do anything with that particular tree. This one right here is Dipteris arborvitae. Sorry about that, folks. Excuse me. Even though it's on a, I believe that's a hemlock, it actually feeds off of grapes when it's in its larvae stage. Excuse me one second. This one down over here is actually one of the, excuse me, one of the tussock moths. Tussock moths actually can be sometimes problematic, but they have a cyclical cycle. So sometimes they're bad, but when they get bad, they usually get knocked back down by viruses. Once again, it's this competition in the environment that keeps them at bay. On the other side over here, though, this is Lamantria dispar. This is the caterpillar of spongy moth, which used to be known as gypsy moth. This is actually one of our non-native invasive species. This one is a generalist and will eat many different types of trees. It has a favorite type that it goes for, which is the oaks, and can be quite devastating to the oaks. Now, one of the things that I've noticed over the course of time is that in an area where the front comes through, the leading front of the spread of spongy moth seems to be quite devastating for a while. I'm down here in southern New Jersey in the Pine Barrens, and we haven't had, at least in my neighborhood, a decent outbreak of spongy moth in quite a while. And that's the thing. So once they get established in the area, they do have peaks and cycle and waning cycles, so that they basically are more predominant during some times, and then at other times they're not. A lot of this has to do with a native fungus that actually affects them and knocks them back. So in wetter years, you won't see them as much. In drier years, you'll have a tendency to see them more. Case in point, when I was working New York DEC in forest health, and we were doing assessments for them in 2021, there were some areas you wouldn't notice anything was happening at all, and then other areas were completely defoliated. It was just absolutely incredible, unbelievable, the amount of damage. That being said, even though they stress the tree, defoliators aren't as bad as some other insects, actually. And here we have a picture of a bagworm. I actually, at the last minute, was trying to run around my neighborhood looking for bagworm evidence because we usually have it all over the place, and I didn't find any, so I had to borrow these images from Rutgers and Wikipedia. This here, down here on an evergreen, this kind of looks like it could be larch. So you can see a lot of the bagworms in there. These are what are known as case makers, and they're in the order of Lepidoptera, meaning the butterflies and the moths. And what they do is you actually have a caterpillar or larvae that is inside this case right here. And they kind of disguise themselves with twigs and parts of leaves and branches and needles just to disguise themselves and to protect themselves from predators. They have a tendency, I know that some types of junipers, when I was working in commercial real estate, we always had problems with them affecting a lot of the commercially grown junipers. It doesn't take them too long. They can actually go in and kill them. But they can be easily knocked back with an application of dormant oil to protect the plants. Here's a big one, though. And again, we start talking about how we start getting into the more devastating critters that are affecting trees. And these are bark-boring insects. Bark-boring insects exist in Hymenoptera order, which is the wasp and bees, the Coleoptera, which is the beetles, and also Lepidoptera. Most of these pictures here, this one right here, the pine tree, and this one over here, these are actually both from southern pine beetle, which is this little guy over here in the left-hand corner. And they're about half the size of a grain of rice. They're very tiny. So you don't normally get to see them. The only time you get to see them is if you see these pitch tubes that are happening. The pitch from the pine tree will push out to try to stop an infestation of them. These holes are dead giveaways. They kind of look like somebody shot the tree with a BB shot. So if you start seeing that on your pine trees, then you got a problem with southern pine beetle. Now,
So are we seeing them in Jersey at this point?
Yeah. And the thing about it is that's the thing is it used to get cold enough. This past winter, I don't know if it was cold enough to actually knock them back. We were really borderline. So some of the areas further to the north, they probably got them knocked back. So like, for example, they've been seeing them as far north as Maine and Long Island. They've probably been knocked back from those areas again, and it'll take some time for them to reemerge and start getting back up that way. But I believe the temperature has to be at least 5 degrees as a low temperature for, I think it's 3 to 5 days, something to that effect. And that's the problem, is we didn't get a long enough stretch to actually get them to knock back. So in the Pine Barrens, they're pretty much here to stay. But one of the things that was noticed is that they only will really go in mass for trees that are under stressed. So one of the reasons that they do this is because there's a lot of pine stands that sometimes, especially in a lot of our forested areas, that are not thinned out. So if you got too many trees that are growing in these areas, they'll start dying naturally, and it's what's known as natural succession. So the dominant trees will live, and then the co-dominant and suppressed trees will eventually die. And it's these stressed pockets that lead to southern pine beetle outbreaks, because what they do is they will get into these stressed areas and take advantage of the fact they send out pheromones so that they draw other beetles in, and the beetles say, "Hey, look, it's a party! Woohoo!" So they come in, and like I said, they just go to town and just overwhelm the tree's defenses. And they basically will live underneath the bark. They go in zigzag patterns and such, and they basically break that cambium layer so that it's not providing nutrients to the tree anymore. And the tree will try to defend itself, and it may try to block these things from happening. But in the process, the tree will eventually suffocate itself and it'll die. It doesn't take too long for these things to actually get hold. There's also a wasp. This one up here is more indicative of that type of wasp. It was actually a European invasive, but they're actually found a little bit more up north. But once again, that telltale, when you have an exit hole in the middle of a pitch tube like that, that's a telltale sign of that. We also have a picture here of emerald ash borer. And for those of you living in New Jersey and are familiar with the problem with ash, you're very familiar with what's happening there. Now, again, all of these species shown are basically in the adult stage. It's the larvae that do the damage, and the larvae are feeding on the phloem and the cambium underneath the bark. And it's that feeding and the way they feed that basically it cuts the trees off from its resources. Now, this one over here is a picture I took when I was up in New York because I didn't know what it was. I saw this nice big shiny gold bug on a beech leaf and wanted to know more about it. Now, this is a beetle and it's a flathead borer, but it's one of our native species. And this is what I was trying to point out before, is that when trees co-evolve with some of these pests, they're nothing more than a nuisance, and they won't necessarily kill the tree. And that's the case with this metallic borer right here. So this is one of our native species, and even though, it looks menacing and I didn't recognize it, it's actually benign. It actually it could kill trees, but typically does not. Which brings me to another interesting critter. This one I actually saw for the first time in 2024. This was down in Atlantic County in Mays Landing at the Lake Lenape, fringing on the Lake Lenape Park. It was actually along Weymouth Road. And what caught my eye was we saw an oak tree which was in decline. I took a closer look at it, and it was this right here that caught my eye. This is very important because the size of this hole, I saw this and thought to myself, oh boy, this is Asian longhorn beetle, which we'll get to in a second. But when I looked a little bit closer, I actually found some of the holes that had these shells that were hanging out of the holes. So I did a little bit more research and found out it's actually one of our native moths called a clear-winged moth, or the oak borer clear-winged moth. It's in the order of Lepidoptera, which once again is the butterflies and the moths. So, and you can tell by the size, it produces a really big larvae. And it just lives underneath the cambium and goes ahead and it will, basically knock the tree down, but doesn't necessarily kill the tree. And that's the case with this particular tree. It was looking sad. About a third of it was looking like it was dead up top, but it was still hanging on. But in the process of doing that, this is on the same tree And this is what's known as a braconid wasp. All right, the braconid wasp actually parasitizes other insects. This is like when I took entomology, I absolutely fell in love with these wasps. This is like such a cool thing. And the thing about biology and ecology, when you're learning about some of this stuff, you get to see the most alien things that you've ever seen before, and you wouldn't believe that these things are out there. But this wasp, and we'll see it in a second, I have a close up view in the next slide, has an ovipositor. And the thing about this picture, and I couldn't believe that I got it, this wasp was actually infecting a victim living underneath the bark. This is what I'm trying to tell you. Once again, because these things co-evolve and coexist, it's actually going after some of those caterpillars that were living in this tree. And now what they do is they victimize the caterpillar, and in the process, the caterpillar basically gets eaten alive, and it can never get to its adult stage, and basically it dies. That's some pretty creepy stuff right there. It's just really interesting how these things live. Here's the close-up that I was talking about. And again, looks like a wasp with a stinger, but this is the ovipositor, and you can actually see it going underneath the bark. This thing's probably about, oh, it's about a third longer than the wasp itself. And once again, it basically lays its eggs in a caterpillar underneath the bark, and then the eggs hatch and they basically eat their victim from the inside. This is the Asian longhorn beetle that I was referring to. Now, the good news is we currently do not have any outbreaks of this particular pest in New Jersey. We did have one at one point in time, but it was eradicated. These are a very large longhorn beetle. We do have native longhorn beetles that look similar, but not. This is very distinctive with the black and white antenna and the black and white coloring on the back. You can see over here this pencil in the hole. That's indicative of the Asian longhorn beetle. They're very destructive, and they especially they go after several different genuses of trees. They're a very devastating species. Anytime that we see any of these outbreaks, the federal government jumps right on it because it has to be eradicated immediately. It's a very destructive pest. And because of that, two things. Number one, this is why I bring it to your attention, because if you ever see this, when we were in New York, we would do what were known as swimming pool surveys, basically going through and looking in people's swimming pool filters to see what kind of bugs they would be catching as a result of their filtration. And also, if you happen to see any of these large exit holes, bring it to a forest professional or an arborist attention or somebody with your a local government forester. Again, reason being, it's the only way that you can keep these things in check is it's got to be acted on immediately. And I think the last outbreak with this, I think there's an active outbreak somewhere out in Ohio, and I think there was a recent one also in South Carolina. So we're basically done with the insects now, and on that note, we're going to answer some more of the questions that were sent in. Is 7 a good all-around insecticide to spray on conifer-related shrubs and trees? One of the things I wanted to disclaim from the start that I neglected to do so, I do not have my pesticide license, so I will not discuss anything with regard to pesticides because technically I can't. I will go far as to make a general statement that I believe in integrated pest management, And to that end, you basically only want to utilize what you need, where you need it, in the strength that you need it to address a particular problem. I don't like the idea of anybody or any having any ideas that you can just like spray all over to address an issue, and you're basically going to have uh, collateral damage as a result. You're going to kill insects that are actually friendly or benign or actually beneficial to the environment. So um, I
John,
really,
the general rule we always say is follow the label instructions, and
yeah,
more is not necessarily better. And in
yeah,
fact, it
exactly.
can be dangerous to you and to the tree.
Yep, yes, thank you. The next one is another pesticide question. I did do a little bit of research on this, and I'm not sure under which circumstances this is being applied, but I will say that peroxide is used as an emergent to get to the scale when it's first coming out. If it's not being applied at the right time, that could have something to do with why it's not being effective. I will say that the research, when I was looking into this question, dormant oil apparently is quite effective for magnolia scale in most stages. So there was also dormant oil, and the other one was a treatment that a an arborist would have to do to inject the tree itself. Do gator bags cause insect infestation? Now, if you don't know what a gator bag is, when you plant a tree, especially in an urban setting, they'll put a water bag around it. It's a bag that basically you fill it up with water, and then it basically self-regulates how much water the tree is getting. So you can fill it up a week, and you only have to go in and top it off every week or so, so that way you don't have to go out and water these trees every day. The research I came across indicates no, that's not the case. However, it could very well be just the fact that the gator bag is increasing the conditions under which the insects are finding it favorable. But no, they don't actually cause insect infestation. Is it more beneficial to replace pines lost to southern borer beetle with eastern cedar or a different evergreen? It depends on what kind of pines we're talking about, and if we're talking about southern pine beetle, of course, yes, you could replace eastern red cedar in those areas. But more to the point, if those trees were stressed out to begin with, that's why the southern pine beetle came in and did its thing. Most important thing to do with southern pine beetle is you got to get on it and address it immediately to be able to make sure it doesn't spread. That's most important. Anything new to report on beech leaf disease? I don't have anything myself. I do know that Jean Epithen has a separate presentation that she's been doing, highlighting some different treatments and stuff like that. But I'm not aware of anything different as far as that's concerned. There was another question. This one had to be more visual. Spotted lanternfly eggs versus mantis eggs. So the picture here on the left shows somebody pointing to a mass of spotted lanternfly. And these on the right are the actual mantis eggs that you would actually see, and different types. You have the native Carolinian mantis or Carolina mantis, and then invasive Asian jumping mantis. So you can see there's a striking difference between these. This kind of looks like a smudge of mud that kind of hardens, and that's actually the case of the eggs. It protects it until the larvae are able to hatch, the first instar. And these actually are very quite distinctive. So, and you'll see these more on the branches and the like as opposed you may see these on the bark of tree, but you'll see these just about everywhere where spotted lanternfly can be found. Beech bark disease, and just going to take a quick look so you understand. This is what healthy beech bark looks like. And once again, this is beech bark under attack. What's happening here? This is a really interesting sequence here, because what happens is you have it's a complex that kills the beech. It starts with this scale, which is in this Hemiptera insect order, and it's a non-native scale. It actually pierces the bark and feeds off of the sap of the tree. In the process of doing so, though, what happens is a native fungus that's always coexisted with the beech gets under the bark, starts growing in an area that it's not normally found. And as a result, you get these outbreaks. And then what happens is you get these cankers, which is basically it is growing so big underneath the bark that it actually will pop open. You get perithecia up here, which is the actual spore producer of the fungus itself. And this is all the bark damage, as you saw. And basically, it's a killer. It's a tree killer, but it's a 1-2 punch. So the scale actually doesn't do the damage. It's the fungus that comes afterward, and that's what's known as a secondary pest. It's a secondary pest that actually kills the tree. They were introduced from Nova Scotia, and it's slowly making its way down. I think we have it up in North Jersey, and I think we may have found some in Salem County within the past year as well. Galls are another really fascinating, interesting thing that you'll get to see on trees. And here's some really off the top examples. This is Gymnosporangium biseptatum, which is endemic to Atlantic white cedar. This was on, looks like it could be an oak tree up in New York. This poor victim right here is actually a black willow. And I mean, a very old tree, and basically it was doing everything it can to hold on. It's falling apart in some spots, but despite the gall, it was still holding on. But it was a really impressive tree, to say the least, even despite the fact that it was suffering from the galls. Galls are caused by insects, fungi, bacteria, or viruses. They can have a whole, what they do is they will infect the tree, and basically they change the biological course of action of the tree itself, which actually causes the gall. When it is the insect, insects actually have larvae that will live inside of the gall and feed off of the tree as a result. And that gall actually protects them while they're in that state. These are all stem galls right here, and these were all caused by fungus. Excuse me. These are leaf and twig galls. This is the woolly sour gall, and this is found on oak trees. This is galls. These are actually called nipple galls, and I actually was able to, one of the projects that we had to do, we actually had to hatch the insect, the adult that was in these galls, which is a pretty interesting thing. And then we have more leaf galls and these actually kind of look like oak acorns, which is kind of interesting. So that in a way they actually hide the insect that's growing inside from any type of damage, a predator. Beech leaf disease, of course, is caused by a nematode. That nematode is actually, it has a hormone inside of it that when it affects the leaf, once again, it changes the composition of that leaf structure so that it's not benefiting the leaf anymore, but it's benefiting the nematode. That being said, it basically is acting effectively as a gall. We're starting to get into the fungi now, and these are the galls of black knot. And black knot is Apiosporina morbosa. It's a fungus that creates galls on prunus. They're relatively benign on most, including Prunus serratina, which is black cherry. And here you see different stages on branches and stuff. And this is actually a more mature specimen right here that was on the stem of the tree. This here is about 8 inches across. So this was actually a pretty large one. Fungi come in many shapes and sizes and forms. It's the mycelium mat that actually does the damage and eats the tree, and it'll be doing so living out of sight without any symptoms on the tree. This is what makes them so dangerous. They typically exhibit fruiting bodies after the damage is done, so by the time you see the fruiting body, it's already too late to do anything about it. They can be pathogenic, saprophytic, which means basically they feed on dead wood, or they can be both, a tree killer and feeding on the dead wood. They typically are specific to the genus and species of the tree. So we had some questions about sooty mold, and this is a picture of sooty mold on Ailanthus caused by spotted lanternfly. One of the things I found out in the research for this presentation was that sooty mold on a tree basically is caused by sap-sucking insects. So if you want to address sooty mold on your tree, then what you do is you have to find out the insects that are actually causing the damage to be able to try to address it. Otherwise, the mold itself, and there's several different species, so I don't get into the genre or the species because it's various in size. But they're otherwise benign. The exception being that when you have mold that's growing on leaves, they can actually be quite detrimental, especially in a garden environment. This fungi, this is a mushroom that is called Cilius americanus, or the chicken fat mushroom. You'll find these growing at the base of white pine trees, Pinus strobus, and specifically when you see this color mushroom growing with white pine, it's specific to that specific species. And it's a mycorrhizae fungi. And mycorrhizae actually live on the roots of trees and are a symbiotic relationship with the trees themselves. Trees actually live better as a result of mycorrhizae interactions. The mycorrhizae will actually provide nutrients to the tree that it can't otherwise get, and in return, just like the lichen, the tree's roots will actually provide a host, a place to for the mycorrhizae to actually live. But again, this is an ectomycorrhizae, and when you see these mushrooms, they're actually popping up from the mycorrhizae living in the ground on the roots, and they're actually looking to spread the spores to other favorable places to live. This is a cauliflower fungus, Spiraceus crispa, and I had Dr. Luke McCauley from University of Maryland Extension. We actually found some really nice specimens of it in a loblolly pine forest that we were looking at down in Maryland. These are indicative of butt rot and root rot to varying degrees. This one here I actually found growing in a loblolly pine plantation. When I was doing some research on it when I found it, the research had indicated at the time that it's relatively benign to loblolly pine, because the problem is that the tree winds up getting harvested before the roots can actually rot and cause the tree to fall down. So it doesn't actually persist long enough in the loblolly pine plantations to actually cause any damage. So there's no reason to do anything about it. But that's not to say that they don't affect these trees, but they can and they do. Somebody had asked me if we would be talking about any edible fungi, but because, like I said, taking mycology, I won't venture in that except with this one exception. This is chicken of the woods, Letoporus sulphureus. It's a very distinctive color here with the orange and yellow and also white fringing around the edges. They call it chicken of the woods because when you cook it out, it actually will taste like chicken. I have not eaten it myself. Um, the host is usually oaks and hardwoods and pine trees. If you find it growing on a pine tree, you definitely do not want to eat it. The only ones that I know have been favorable are when they are very fresh, and of course, we're talking about those growing on oak trees. They are a brown rot fungus, and they affect live trees and dead trees. Talking about mushrooms, there's just so many different varieties to talk about. I could give a whole separate lecture on both bugs and fungi, as a matter of fact. There's just so many things to talk about. But they're soft-bodied fruiting bodies. They can be seasonal or annual, and they do not persist. Most of them are Basidium mycetes, and they release spores from gills or pores. The fruiting body is evidence of the fungal mat in the tree. They can produce heart rot, brown rot, or root rot. Effectively, what's happening here is the mushrooms are affecting the tree. How they got there, there's many different avenues. What's known as ports. Some of it is damage to the tree. You could have a landscaper who hits a tree with a weed whacker, for example, or another tree falling down in the forest and brushing up against it, logging equipment. It could be anything. Once you have that port open, though, and you get spores in there, the mycelium goes in and starts doing its thing and will start causing structural damage to the tree. Eventually, the tree will come down. It doesn't necessarily have to happen right away, but eventually it'll cause damage to actually affect the structure of the tree. These are conchs. The difference between conchs and mushrooms is conchs are hardened and they're perennials, and they will actually grow larger during the course of their existence on the tree. Other than that, once again, telltale function, if you see mushrooms growing on your trees, have somebody take a look at it because that usually indicates that you have a problem. Case in point, this was a post oak growing outside my office in 2024. We saw this mushroom emerge. I pointed it out to the building manager. This is Climicodon septentrionalis, northern tooth polypore. The arborist came over to check the tree, and the tree was hollow. They took it down the next week. It was that bad off. It probably would have fallen down in a storm or something like that. It was right next to some picnic tables, so it was a good thing that we found this right away, and that they reacted on it. Because once again, when you see this, you get somebody, an arborist or a licensed tree expert to come out and take a look at these things, to look for cavity, heart rot, and the like, because you don't want to have failure in an area that is going to wind up hurting anybody or affecting any property. This particular polypore will affect beech, maples, and oaks. This is one of my favorites right here. This is armillaria. And it's really funny to hear a forester say that they have a favorite fungus, and especially a fungus by the name of armillaria, because it has a very notorious reputation in northern forest. It's known as black shoestring fungus, and that's what you're seeing over here in this cambion off a dead tree right here. The reason I'm so interested in it is because it actually will go in, and these are the mycelium fans that actually will strangle the tree. It kills the tree falls down, and it keeps eating the tree. It's one of the few species that is not only pathogenic but also saprotrophic as well. So it weakens the tree, kills the tree, and then it just consumes the tree. Um, and these are the honey fungus that you see, the mushrooms. Very telltale. When you see them in the forest, it's definitely armillaria. When we talk about out of this world, this is one of the most out of the world fungi, and this is cedar apple rust. This is a Basidiomycetes. Rust typically have to have two O's to complete its life cycle. In this particular case, what you see here is the tilial horns on the cedar tree. It's benign on the cedar, but when it affects the leaves on apple trees, it can be quite devastating. And that's one of the reasons why in the state of New York, if you have apple orchards, you have to have a mile's distance between that and the nearest eastern red cedar. Eastern red cedars are not allowed to be anywhere near apple orchards in the state of New York because it's such a devastating fungus. Will the black knot I see on my purple plum tree spread to other trees or to shrubs nearby? Yes, there is a good possibility it will. One of the extension articles I read indicated on ornamentals, it's best to cut it off and remove it. According to Google, sooty mold is rarely fatal. What are the secondary issues and associated problems to be aware of with sooty mold? Basically, you're talking about secondary pests like bees and wasps and such that can basically get drawn to the area and they wind up being a nuisance. It's something to be concerned about. Slime molds, I just threw this in here because it was really interesting. You won't see them growing on any living trees. They only exist on dead trees. Slime molds can't be put into any one category or any one genre or species for that matter, but they are the most fascinating and interesting of species because what they do is they basically go after and they trudge along and they'll exist like little tiny mushrooms until they get wet and then they're on the move and they basically move along and they will just eat bacteria and such. Fascinating species. You really should learn more about them. What are a series of parallel holes on the trunk of my apple tree? Well, I'm glad you asked. Could be that it's caused by this critter right here from up in Canada that comes down and overwinters in our area. This is the yellow-bellied sapsucker. And what they will do is basically do a series of horizontal holes across the tree looking for sap. And when they find a tree that's photosynthesizing, they will actually expand those holes so that they can feed off of the tree. This is off of a Norway spruce in my just outside my kitchen window, and that's where I get this picture from, as a matter of fact. And it's been a regular visitor coming back to the tree on a regular basis. Relatively benign. It can stress the tree. If you're worried about the tree and it's a special tree to you, you can wrap the tree in hardware cloth or burlap to prevent them from affecting your tree. We'll look at plants real quick. If you've never seen these, this is mistletoe. Mistletoe is a really interesting species. This one right here is Phoradendron leucarpum. And if you look really closely, you can actually see the white berries, which are very sticky. Birds will eat them and they'll track them and put them on their feet, and then they wind up spreading to all different parts of the tree. Now, interesting thing, they are evergreen, so they will photosynthesize. So they're what's known as semi-parasitic. So they don't really draw a lot of resources from the tree itself. They can overwhelm a tree's defenses, but generally they're benign because they can produce their own food. They're basically just taking advantage of the fact that they don't have roots, so they have to actually draw moisture in from the tree itself. These are vines. Vines are a plant that you want to keep off your trees. Over here we have English ivy. This right here was a 2-acre plot in southern Maryland that I came across of Chinese wisteria. It was solid and it was all the way up to my chest. It was all that was growing out there. You go further back into these woods, this is a loblolly pine plantation. I actually found a 24-inch tree that was being girdled by wisteria vine. It is very devastating. It will actually go in and just take over entire areas of the forest. This here is what I refer to as an orphan lot. And basically, when we don't tend to things, this is how things, invasive species and such, this is how they spread and they basically kill trees. And so, what do I say about this? Save a tree, kill a vine. It doesn't matter what the vine is, it doesn't matter if it's native. And if you're worried about like wild grapes growing in the forest, well, believe me, there's plenty out there. You can save your tree, but kill a vine. Absolutely. This is one of the other questions that came in. As our earth warms up, will there be more damage to our trees, and can we still prevent that? And this is my answer here. What is this? Why, this is the bottom line. And what is the bottom line here? Nature is a part of us, and we are a part of nature. This came from my presentation that I did on the trouble with oaks. There's 2 versions of it available on YouTube, one that I did for Maryland and one I did for New Jersey. But climate change, the species that are being affected, changes in climate, they cannot readily adapt quickly enough. Not as fast as the climate is changing. That's one of the problems. The latitude, of course, affects as well as the elevation, and trees by themselves are sessile by nature. They can't just move away. So, to answer your question, that's entirely up to us and what we do, what we learn, and how we react. So, we have additional resources here. Some people were asking for additional resources. The one you're probably going to be most interested in is this one down here to iNaturalist.org, and you look for the Seek app. You can get this on your phone. You can point it to many species, and then it'll give you a general idea of what it is. It may not identify it exactly, but even, excuse me, if it does give you an exact identification and you need to know, you just may want to double check the information. I do this through any app because I don't necessarily trust what I'm being told. So a little bit about the DelAtlantic Conservation District. The districts were founded in July 1937 with the adoption of New Jersey Soil Conservation Act. It's born out of land use abuse common in before the 1930s. We address a wide variety of natural resource conservation issues, and they also enforce the soil and erosion control or Code 251. We provide technical assistance on erosion and sediment control, aerial photos, soil surveys, wetland maps, and GIS and GPS. There's our QR code for our website, and our forestry department provides management plans for woodland owners and community forestry. And we also work close with NRCS. And this is the end. Any questions? So we'll go through here. I'm going to look here at the Q&A first.
Yeah. John, you want to drop the share?
Yes. Oh, can I? Yeah, I can do that. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
I took a look at the Q&A. There are a couple of kind of specific questions. One about your Norway maple experience that you were having, that you described early on.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I've been seeing this, Hypaxilon exists in the environment naturally, and my understanding is that the trees are under stress. I actually did a forest assessment up in Gidsboro, And it was an area that used to be wetlands that are suddenly dry. So, of course, the red maples that were growing up there just are stressed, and they're not, they're going through more than they would usually expect. And as a result, the hypaxilon is getting the upper hand of them, and basically it causes blistering cankers, and basically it just interferes that flow of nutrients underneath the bark.
There is a question about beech trees and the concern that it will be a situation like ash. I would say it's pretty difficult to predict that right now.
Yeah, or I'm sorry, beech trees right now are getting hit with a 1-2 punch. So, you have the spread of beech leaf disease, and it's overlapping areas where you have beech bark disease.
Mhm.
So what we're seeing up in New York prior to beech leaf disease is you were getting basically stump sprouting of massive amounts of beech in the understory that were trying to come back off of the original trees that had passed, and unfortunately, they were creating these monocultures of nothing but absolute beech in the understory that were prohibiting anything else from growing.
So I think it's a wait and see at this point in time.
Yep.
Last question that we have open is, have you seen dodder spread into trees?
Have seen, what was it?
Dodder, Dodder.
Don't know what that is.
I'm
I'm
not familiar
sorry.
with it either. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what that
It's
is.
okay.
I'd have to look it
Sorry
up.
that we came up with a stumper right here at the end, but we've had a
Oh,
great present. It's
it's
Charlize, yeah.
Charlize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, figured you'd get a
Right.
good question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. But in any event, John, it was a really great presentation.
Thank you.
Super deep,
A lot of
covered a
fun.
lot of things,
Yep.
and the comments have been incredible. And we had a very large audience, and everybody was very well behaved in the chat. And people answered
Yeah.
others' questions while you were going on with your presentation, but it was truly excellent. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Thank
Do
you.
you want to give contact information, or do you want to encourage that, or?
Yeah, actually, if I could just share my screen real quick.
Sure.
I'll go back to the last slide. My contact information is right down here on the lower left side down here.
There you go.
Forestry at DelAtlantic.org. And as Rich knows, I mean, I live and breathe this stuff because I'm kind of a quirk of nature that way. I mean, I spend my time, I did this for free. And basically, in my spare time, this is what I do. I'm a bit of a cryptogamous, which basically means anything that's producing with spores is something that I like and I'm interested in. So I'm out in the forest all the time, hiking around, looking at all kinds of stuff and gathering pictures and the like. And one takeaway I want to give to you all is just make sure that before you react and do anything, do your homework and realize that all of these things work together. The biggest thing in life that we have to worry about is invasive species, honestly. I just came from an assessment I did up in Warren County, and I was just blown away with the Japanese barberry everywhere. I'm thinking to myself, it's one thing when I tell this woodland owner what they're going to do on their property, but what about the people down the road that aren't doing anything? And so is all this going to come right back onto the property? It's just a trouble, and it's going to take a lot of glyphosate and an army of volunteers, honestly, to get to the upper hand of it. We have to work together. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's very good advice. We were just having the same conversation, John, about if one person does the work and the neighbor doesn't, is it really worthwhile doing the work?
Yeah,
And how quickly will it return? But in any event, just get back to what you did. it was great to cover all of these different conditions. And to me, it's almost limitless what you're going to see on your trees as you walk through the woods. And so you can't do everything. You can react to those that seem more out of sorts. And hopefully this was helpful to people in trying to say, well, that's not too bad a thing. So I'm not going to worry about that first, but that's a really bad thing. And I'm going to worry about that. And
Yep,
hopefully we
exactly.
gave perspective in this presentation that allows people to make choices. And don't forget to consult your
Yep.
professionals when you need help, because
Yes,
sometimes it's
absolutely.
just beyond you. And the last
Yep.
warning is if it's a mushroom, you have to go with somebody who's a pro to tell you what it is. Don't try to make the
Yes,
decisions yourself. Very dangerous
absolutely.
stuff. And
As
on
they
that note,
say, every mushroom is edible at least once.
correct.
And
That is the line.
read into
Yes,
that. That means it may be the last thing you ever eat. And that's
correct.
not what you want to do. So,
Well, take a bow, John. There are so many thank yous on the screen and so many
yep.
hellos from people you know. It was a
Yep.
great evening.
Yep. Good to
And
see you all.
yeah, it was good to see you. And I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you
Yep.
very, very much.
Thank
Have a good
you. Good
night.
night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.